Welcome to another episode of Curious Crossroads. I'm Doug. This is my son, Doug. And today it's our good fortune to have with us in our studios investigative journalist Ashton Forbes. He's been featured on some of the biggest podcast and talk TV shows out there. And today he's going to be discussing one of the biggest aviation mysteries of all time. Ashton, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate you. And thank you, Doug, as well, for having me on. I can't wait to discuss with you.
So we are going to be talking about MH370. If you remember, MH370 was the Malaysian airliner that went missing March 8th of 2014. To this day, it's still one of the biggest, like you say, aviation mysteries of all time, maybe the biggest. Ashton here, he has his own take. It's an incredible one. A lot of people are going to have a hard time just getting their mind around it. But before we get into that, Ashton, if you can just give us a little background. Why did you get into this? Why are you so captivated by it? And what's your end goal with all this?
Yeah, and I just started as a normal person like anybody else. We were just talking right before this that I've been in healthcare IT my whole life, my whole career. I was never somebody who was big into conspiracies or considered myself any type of social media influencer before all of this. It just... everything, the stars aligned in a way where, these videos kind of reemerged on the internet. I started investigating them. It led me to investigate the plane and uncover where this plane actually went. And then that led me down this path of finding out about this science and physics that has been out there for decades, many decades, and potentially also being suppressed from the public from going mainstream. And that's led me now to this situation I'm in where I still have one foot in my old life and then another foot talking to, people like you guys and other podcasters out there about what I think is the most incredible story in the history of the world. A missing Boeing 777 that just disappeared off the face of the earth in a time where that's just not possible at all. A time where we are looking at disclosure of exotic technology that will change our entire civilization, potentially overnight as well. And it's coming out one way or another, whether or not I talk about it, other people talk about it. This technology is a discovery, not an invention, which means that it's something that you can understand without any level of material science and comprehension. And even the people out there listening, you don't have to be a PhD physicist to understand it.
Well, that's good for us.
Yeah, you can break it down at a level where normal people can understand the things that we're missing from our current understanding of cosmology. So what do I want out of this? At the end of the day, I don't really have plans or schemes. I think of the movie, the Dark Knight, with respect to Heath Ledger and the Joker, is like, I just do things. And then I try to see what kind of reaction that we can get. Because what we're going to be presenting here is so incredible that for a lot of people, it completely shatters their worldview. And that is something that's very difficult to accept. So for the most part, what I'm trying to do is wake up as many people as I can, knowing that there's going to be people that resist this as well. I think it was Max Planck who discovered quantum mechanics with the famous quote that said, "Science advances one funeral at a time," which really means that you kind of have to get out with the old way of thinking before we can advance and leapfrog to a new understanding. And I think that's what's happening.
And are you going to start off by giving us what the supposed official...
What people don't realize is there's no official story for what happened to the plane. If you were to look and ask the officials, they say that it disappeared. That's the official story. The story that people hear out there, the most common one, is this idea that it must be some kind of pilot suicide. That's a conspiracy and a myth, just like any other story that might be out there. It has no factual evidence that supports it. It's all just based on conjecture, like the idea of, somebody must have turned off the transponder and they must have been trying to avoid radar and all this other stuff. This is all just conjecture. The things that people think are evidence that support that view is like that they claim there was this simulator that the pilot had. Actually, a lot of pilots have custom simulators. The FBI looked into it. There was nothing suspicious about it at all. It was bloggers that actually tried to connect this idea that the simulator data was some kind of flight path that the guy was planning out the route. But
this was similar data that the pilot had?
Yeah, they checked his simulator, home simulator, and this narrative started to form that he planned this route out. But actually, if you look at the evidence factually, you realize that it was actually just MH370 which was from Kuala Lumpur to Jeddah, going northwest, that he actually was scheduled to fly that route on February 4th, and he was practicing it on February 2nd, right before that route. And they claim that like when this plane turned back over and went over Malaysia, that somehow this route is like close enough to claim that he was practicing this route out there.
So it was for a totally different route?
Completely different plane flight that he was scheduled. And then they take like one custom route. Like if you're playing a simulator game, like you can say, put this random waypoint in there, and they just connect it to that and claim that, oh, this is the route that he was flying into the South Indian Ocean, and that he was flying by Penang to say goodbye to his hometown instead of trying to land the plane, which is what he was most likely really actually trying to do. And they try to vilify him. But when you get to the facts, it's like the officials have said they don't believe this is even something that could be committed by one person.
Were they able to find anything as far as mental health issues with him in the past? Or
that's a good question. There was no issues whatsoever. The officials, his wife, his family, the co-workers, everybody ruled it out, said he was a nice guy. There was nothing wrong with him. Florence Chang even got access to his medical records from his family. They got a release to give her his medical records. No red flags mentally at all as well. So this is the part where sometimes people say, oh, Ashton, you're hurting the victims when you present these theories that are so out there or whatever. And I say, you're hurting the pilot and his family. Imagine being the pilot and his family where you know, your husband or your father or whatever was not an evil person, and the world's trying to claim that he was some kind of monster that took 238 other lives with him, So, yeah, the biggest thing, though, is planes don't crash without leaving debris fields. They don't disappear in 2014 either when we have thousands of satellites in the sky. They don't crash into the ocean without leaving acoustic detections. We have hydrophone system, and the Navy has something called SOSUS, which can hear even the tiny Titan sub implode by the Titanic. We can triangulate basically anything that hits the water and figure out exactly where
even
it's
back
at.
In that time.
Oh, yeah. Back in that time, it was only 10 years ago. It was only 2014.
Right.
So, yes, absolutely. The SOSUS system's been around since like the 50s or 60s.
Wasn't there some debris that showed up like in Madagascar or something like that?
And here's another big misconception. And again, this really comes down to like if people just looked at the evidence without listening to the narratives, like everything unravels. Because the only reason why we think the plane went in the South Indian Ocean are these satellite pings from this company called Inmarsat, which is connected to U.S. intelligence. The pings have never been corroborated by any third-party source. There's nobody else that said, oh, yeah, we also had these pings just from this one company. The CEO of the company said the data is good, assuming that it wasn't manipulated in some way. You're like, that's a weird disclaimer to say when you're releasing data, especially when you waited like 10 weeks to release the data and you could have released it like the next day after the plane disappeared. And one of the engineers is even quoted saying that they thought someone was playing a prank on Inmarsat. And you're like, okay, why would the engineer be saying this? They're the ones looking at the data. They clearly saw something wrong in that data. And the weird thing about it that I've only recently figured out from looking at the Royal Aeronautical Society's report on MH370 is that they claim that the computers were turned off, like a few minutes before the plane goes dark. But then all of a sudden at 18:25 UTC, an hour and a half after this plane goes dark, all of a sudden the computer turns back on. Now all of a sudden we're tracking the plane with the satellites again. If you're flying a plane away, you're not turning the computer back on to track you after you're on your getaway. That makes no sense at all. But if you're trying to build a cover-up and claim that this plane went into some remote part of the Indian Ocean, then you want the data to come back online just at the exact right moment. And so this debris, here's the thing. So the pings are the only thing that indicate the plane went in the South Indian Ocean. No witnesses saw it there. We never found a single piece of debris in the South Indian Ocean. The official search that lasted for 3 years, that searched above water and below water, never found one piece of the plane, not a black box, nothing in the South Indian Ocean. A little over a year later, debris starts to wash ashore in Africa. Reunion Islands, mainland Africa, people are picking it up, random people. Why was the search not finding it? Because that debris was too far away. That was so far outside of the search zone. It was thousands of miles away from the search zone. Initially, people start freaking out, like, why is the debris washing up in Africa? But this gets glossed over by the narratives that are out there where quickly they say, oh, we reworked the models. The models previously said the debris couldn't have gotten to Africa. It should have washed ashore in Western Australia. You even look at the ocean currents and you can see the ocean currents flow to the east down there, where this seventh arc based on the satellite pings is located. So what I'm saying is that these two ideas are mutually exclusive. Either that plane crashed in the South Indian Ocean or that debris is from MH370, but not both. Either that plane ended up somewhere else, which is more consistent with the debris washing ashore in Africa a year later, or those satellite pings are phony or legit. They can't be both. And if you look at it from that perspective, for me, the answer is clear. That debris is from MH370. The amount of debris total, it's like 20 pieces at the absolute most, if you assume every piece they found is from MH370. Even if you add it all up, that still is not even enough to show that a plane crashed. The largest piece, this flaperon that's like 7 or 8 feet long, they take pictures of it to make it look huge. You can fly a plane without a flaperon. You can land a plane without a flaperon. So even when you add up all this debris, it doesn't even prove that the plane crashed. And then you look at what would be a better location if you look at this map of where that debris would have gotten into the water. And it's actually somewhere in the Maldives. Like if this plane ended up in the water or was disassembled and some pieces were thrown in the water, if you do that near the Maldives, then all the debris can easily get to all the locations in Africa, including South Africa, which is like 3,000 miles away from the crash site. So that's the most important thing that people need to understand.
What about a black box? Is it common when a plane crashes that there wouldn't be
extremely
a signal
uncommon.
or
yeah.
Does that have to be tripped by someone inside the plane to begin with, or is that just an automatic thing?
It's automatic. Yeah. So the black boxes are rated for up to like 20,000 feet depth. So there's nowhere this thing can be hiding at the bottom of the ocean where we wouldn't be able to find it. They transmit on a frequency that is completely unique, that is artificial, that can't be confused with whales or any other normal natural sounds.
And they don't have to be turned on by human touch?
Nope, automatically turns on. In fact, there's also an ELT, emergency transponder, on the plane that only goes off on crash, that can't be deactivated whatsoever. Never went off either. So when you start to look at the actual factual evidence related to this, you're like, claiming that we know this plane crashed is like finding my pinky finger and claiming that you know that I was murdered, right?
Right.
Yeah, sure, you found a pinky finger, indicates there's some foul play. Doesn't indicate that I was stabbed or shot or that my body's been buried somewhere, right? I could just have fled to Belize and now I'm there and I'm missing a finger, So this is the true story of the plane. Starts to get very murky right away. And the question people start asking is, well, what's the deal with all these narratives that are being pushed out there? And what are we really trying to cover up? What really happened to this plane, right?
Right.
So what really happened to this plane, if you look at the totality of the evidence, that MH370X, this organization that I put together of researchers that have dug into, literally we found everything there is out there. Every old article, everything related to this plane, everything anyone else has said about the plane, is that this was pretty clearly an emergency event, most likely related to the 500 pounds of dangerous lithium-ion batteries that were stacked in the cargo bay right next to the electronics bay. This is like the worst possible spot to have flammable, can't put out these lithium-ion batteries. We've seen them all in the news the last few years, where recently this, first of all, the Hamas pagers and the batteries exploding and stuff like that. Like we're seeing now that we can remote detonate batteries, especially if they've been tampered with. But we've also seen that the South Korea factory fire, they had lithium-ion battery fire break out. 20-something people died. And you ask the question, why did these people all die? As a factory, you should just be able to run away. The answer is the smoke from a lithium-ion battery will basically kill you after just 1 to 2 inhalations.
And there's documentation that these lithium batteries were definitely on board.
100%.
And why were they on board?
The why has never been revealed, which is very suspicious. But we do know that the Malaysian Airlines CEO lied about the batteries for 2 weeks. They did not reveal that the battery was on the plane until March 20th. The plane disappeared on March 8th. So for 12 days, they didn't say anything, and they said there was no dangerous cargo on board, because that's the first question people are asking. Was there dangerous cargo on board?
Right.
And then they reveal, 221 kilograms, 487 pounds of these lithium-ion batteries in the forward cargo bay. And they missed 2 security screenings too, by the way. And you ask yourself, why would they not reveal that right away? But the answer seems pretty obvious. If you reveal on March 9th or March 8th that you've got 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries in the forward cargo bay, everyone's going to immediately pick out this must have been a fire emergency event scenario. In fact, every single witness we've been able to find supports this theory. There's not one witness that supports hijacking or a suicidal pilot. The first witness, Mike McKay, sees the plane on fire at the exact same time the plane goes dark, and he's on an oil rig. They claim that he's too far away to see the plane. They claim that he's making up stories or whatever. And he sees it only on fire for a few seconds. Some people have also falsely twisted his story.
Was he the only witness? Because I know you mentioned that it was 300 miles away when he saw it at night.
Not the only one. So that was at like 1 a.m. as well. So he's on an oil rig having a smoke break, sees the plane on fire for a few seconds. There was 9 witnesses along the coast that hear loud noises at the exact same moment. And they're all along the coast from Thailand to Malaysia and these small towns that are there as well. So this would indicate that the batteries ignited, exploded, made a loud noise, and that people could hear it from the coast. And then 10 minutes later, plane turns around, gets manual turnaround, and we know it did a manual emergency descent maneuver as well. They were able to track the radar plots and determine that. This is actually the opposite of what you do in a suicidal pilot scenario.
Right.
So when you hear these other investigators, they always leave out all the evidence that proves them wrong, which is hilarious. Like if you're trying to asphyxiate everybody, you will depressurize the cabin, and then you increase in altitude, because the higher altitude you are, the thinner the air is. When you're flying low, it's the opposite. You're trying to give people enough oxygen to breathe, because the gas masks only last for like 15 or 20 minutes. And so even if you're getting to the ground right away, especially if you've got dangerous, deadly lithium-ion battery smoke in the cabin, you have to get on the ground very quickly. So
if you back up just a little bit, though, again, there's been no reason given for why the batteries were on board to begin with.
No reason. We know that they were Motorola batteries, which will become somewhat relevant when we talk about the motive, because this company called Freescale Semiconductors broke off from Motorola in 2004, and they happen to have 20 important semiconductor engineers on board this plane, which is very, very unusual when you look at the manifest. But yeah, no explanation has been given. If you have investigated all the evidence like we have, you find that there's a Russian GRU, like the equivalent of the FBI intelligence report, that claims that Russia knows the United States took the plane, and they don't know why the U.S. Navy abducted the plane, but that some cargo got on board this plane, and they were tracking that cargo getting on board the plane, which could indicate that somebody planted either something, a device in the batteries or with the batteries or the batteries themselves to force this diversion. And you would say, well, why would they do this? Well, if for a diversion, you're trying to make the plane go from one location to the next. And if it turns out that my theory is true, that this is some type of 6th generational warfare going on between the United States and China, then what we'd be trying to do is get that plane away from the South China Sea, where China has all their surveillance apparatus. And we want to move it somewhere further away from that. They don't have their satellites, radars, et cetera, as out of their range out there. So
walk us through one time too, as far as mapping it out. So it leaves from that Kuala Lumpur.
So it's going northeast towards Beijing from Kuala Lumpur.
Is that where it catches on fire, we think?
It goes dark, 40 minutes after it takes off. Plane goes completely dark. Now it's turning back around, manual descent maneuver, emergency descent maneuver, and it gets seen 10 minutes after it goes dark, and it turns back towards Malaysia by 10 or 8 fishermen on a boat just off the coast.
So they did see it.
People did see it. So it does kind of corroborate Mike McKay's sighting. So not only do you have these people that heard these loud noises, but they see the plane flying unusually low, which corroborates the emergency descent maneuver as determined by the radar. And again, we know the reason why they'd be flying low is to give them oxygen, but they can't fly too low because there's actually mountains in the area as well, and it's pitch black. And if you have no power as well, you have no lights. So you don't want to fly too low because you don't want to crash into a mountain. So you've got to have just the right altitude to have people be able to breathe, but not risk crashing in the mountains.
And do you think they're looking for a place to land at that point on land?
Oh yeah, I think that the pilot was experienced. He would have known right away to go to Penang as the closest airport, and he wouldn't have gone to Kuala Lumpur because the terrain would be slightly better in terms of the mountains, and it's a little bit further to go to Kuala Lumpur. There's actually a Wired article that actually talks about the electrical fire scenario without even knowing the batteries were on the plane. And this was a pilot that wrote that article and said that, yeah, it makes total sense, especially if you turn off the main bus, now the plane would go dark as well. So if you were trying to figure out like what the fire damaged, they would have actually manually turned off the power to the plane to figure that out. But we can't know exactly how much damage the fire would have caused. We just know that the fire being right there next to the electronics bay.
They know for a fact that it turned around.
Yep.
That's all documented.
Yep.
At what point does everything go blank where they don't have
Doesn't
any?
the military pick it
Yeah,
up?
so they actually lied for a few days too, and then finally admitted that the military radar was tracking the plane. And this is why right away the obfuscation was obvious. Like, this plane goes dark. We're getting multiple times. We're getting told the plane goes dark at 17:21, but then we're also being told they lost contact at 18:40 UTC, and you're going, wait, that's an hour and 20 minutes. Like, why? Where was this plane? What was going on with this? You know?
Right.
And so they finally admit a few days later, after searching in the South China Sea for several days, oh, just kidding, we actually knew the whole time. The plane went back over the peninsula of Malaysia and then flew into the Andaman Sea and the Malacca Straits towards the Nicobar Islands. And they're like, wait, what? Like, how does this make any sense now? Like, why were you lying about this? And
how did they rationalize that?
In a lot of cases, they didn't. And if you watch the press releases, which I urge people to go watch the old press releases, they're just obfuscating the whole time. People are asking normal questions, and every time they respond is, well, that will come out. That will come out in time. That's usually how they respond. But this is that's deception. That's lying. That's obfuscating the truth. Like, when somebody asks you, like the New York Times asked them straight up, is it even possible to make a plane go dark? Like, is that even something a person can do? And their answer, instead of just, it's like a normal yes or no question, we'll figure that out. That'll be figured out. And it's like, well, shouldn't you just know that? Like, shouldn't that just be, they follow up and say that, shouldn't you just know that? Isn't that just a normal thing that people should ask? We'll follow up with that. Somebody else asked, like, there are spy satellites in the regions, U.S. spy satellites. Are you in touch with them? Yes. And then the Rolls-Royce engine data should be transmitting. Are you in touch with them? Yes. This is the Malaysian Minister of Defense saying this in the press conferences.
Is this all on the Netflix documentary? I know
Almost
did you see
none
the Netflix
of this.
documentary?
The Netflix documentary is one of the worst documentaries I've ever seen in my entire life.
Did they try to spin it in a certain direction?
Yeah, and featuring Jeff Wise is a major mistake.
What's his position?
He doesn't really have one. A lot of these guys, too, they're kind of nebulous in it. But Jeff Wise is the guy that predominantly claimed that the plane was hijacked by Russia and flown to Russia. Which, look, I'm willing to believe any theory that has evidence to support it.
Yep.
But just because there was one Russian guy on the plane doesn't mean that Russia took the plane. If Russia took the plane, we would have exposed the hell out of it. And you're not flying this plane past, I don't know how many radars it would take to get to Russia, including some that are not allied with Russia. You also cannot land this plane at any civilian airports because they're going to get found out. And this is part of what I actually spoke to Billy Vincent, former security director for the FAA, because I found an old article where he had speculated that the fire was what happened to this plane. And he speculated that before he knew about the batteries. And I went, wow, I need to talk to this guy. So I reached out to him and he was happy to talk to me about it. And he said there was a flight called UPS Flight 6 where basically this exact same scenario happened, where there were lithium-ion batteries on board. They ignited. The pilot couldn't even get his hood on in time. He passed out, and that was it. The co-pilot took control of the plane. They tried to do an emergency landing, but they couldn't land. Why? Because the smoke was blocking the windshield in the cockpit, and they couldn't see anything. And the plane ended up crashing. They both ended up dying. And it's very analogous to what happened with MH370 because the plane's going to Penang, but the plane does not land there. And the big question has been why? Why did it not land there? When you take into account there was no power, they had no lights, it was 2 a.m, it's pitch black, and the smoke possibly blocking windshield, how are you going to land the plane?
Right.
You know, so we know the plane was flying low at that point because the co-pilot's cell phone pings a cell tower, which means that it had to be under about 7,000 feet. You guys can all test this yourself. Next time you get an airplane, just forget to turn your phone off and see when it is you lose signal, somewhere around 7,000 feet as you go up. So then the big question is, well, why does it now deviate? So instead of just going straight through Indonesia to the South Indian Ocean, now it goes to the northwest towards the Nicobar Islands. And this is where about 30 minutes later, 20 to 30 minutes later, they claim military radar claims to have lost contact with the plane at 1822 UTC. They claim is the last radar. Now, if you extrapolate out the last plot, including like all the radar plots and into a straight line, you find that you go straight through, basically right next to Car Nicobar in the Nicobar Islands. This is highly relevant because there's a woman, Catherine T., who is in that area within 100 miles or so. She had a very detailed sighting of seeing the plane. And her sighting was seeing the plane glowing orange with dark smoke coming out of the back of it, flying low and descending. She's on a boat. She's on night watch on the boat, 2 a.m. She sees this. She can't believe what she's seeing. She gets to land, finds out about MH370 and goes, I saw the plane. Like I had to be that plane. So what do the investigators do? Ignore her and discredit her. They talk to her. They pressure her into changing the time of her story. Literally, she told me this when I spoke to her. And claim that, well, it can't be true. We've got these satellite pings that say the plane went in the South Indian Ocean, so Catherine T's sighting can't be accurate. I talked to Billy Vincent about it and other people, and they go, and I've spoken to other experts, including one who has testified on Capitol Hill about the dangers of lithium-ion batteries in planes. And so that, no, the plane glowing orange, like that's consistent with bromine being released from the Halon 1301 fire extinguishing devices in the plane. Bromine is a halogen gas. You can find these clips online where you can see this orange gas like permeating around, and you can imagine that's what she was seeing on the plane. And then the dark smoke would have been from the trying to kind of get the smoke out of the plane, potentially through the AC exhaust ports if it's circulating through the air conditioning system.
Why would they care if she said, I saw the plane? Why would they say, oh, really? That's great. I mean, why would they care that she actually saw it? And
unless they're hiding something. Or
that's exactly it, right? The only reason why you would care is if her story corroborates a different narrative than you're trying to push. It's clear to me they didn't want the fire scenario to gain traction. They lied about the batteries getting on board the plane. They potentially covered up other communications with the plane. And the way we know this is there was a communication after the plane went dark. Another Boeing 777 pilot, 10 minutes after the plane goes dark, flying in Narita, doesn't want to be named because they don't want to lose their job and have their life ruined like these other witnesses.
Right.
Heard potentially both pilots.
Could I ask, have you had any repercussions where you're feeling people coming after you? Or?
Not really. And to be honest with you, I'll tell you that I've been told that I'm being somewhat protected by the faction of people out there that want this science and technology to come out. It's not as simple as everybody out there is evil. There's probably some people believe that the implications of this are so huge that it needs to be covered up. Other people believe the implications are so huge that it needs to come out. And then going to the big fire scenario here, though, is that, you know, her sighting indicates a fire. Pretty damn clearly it indicates a fire. Now, the problem is this plane is not going to last for 8 hours into the South Indian Ocean if it's on fire in the Nicobar Islands. This is actually the location where Catherine T's at, is the location where they claim that these satellite pings turned back on, and now all of a sudden this plane's flying 5.5 hours into the South Indian Ocean, just on a ghost flight or through a suicidal pilot. And you realize her story completely demolishes those pings. It basically proves those pings must be fabricated because this plane's got to go down very quickly after this. And she's watching it descending at a low altitude in her sighting as well, which would indicate that they might be attempting an ocean ditching of the plane. She even said in one of her blog posts, which you guys can still find online, or you can find my reporting on it as well, that she was actually afraid that the plane might crash and capsize the boat with the, like if it lands next to her or whatever and the waves like rock, they could capsize the boat. So this is why they had to discredit her.
Was she all by herself? Because usually if there's somebody else there, that helps witnesses.
Yeah, so this is what I'll say with respect to it, which I don't think violates her trust very much. But there was basically 3 people on the boat, her husband, who was asleep, and one other crew member. Supposedly one of the other crew members potentially witnessed part of this, but did not want to be involved because of someone in his family that could have repercussions based on what their job was.
And then again, too, at this point, did you say the military has lost track of it at this point?
Yeah, like right around the time when Catherine T sees it, within 15 minutes of Catherine T seeing it.
So then the other thing I'm wondering too is if the military is tracking this on their radar, are they seeing that it's going way off route? Are they like, this is not normal? So they're not sending anyone up to look at it or anything like that?
And this is the part where if anyone watched the Candace Owens interview, I love when she added in the interview of the Malaysian Minister of Defense. The sketchiest interview I've ever seen in my whole life, bar none. Nothing's even close. You could play it as a Saturday Night Live skit and it would get laughs because the guy is so uncomfortable and clearly not prepared for the interview and deflecting and dodging every question, won't answer any basic questions. But one of the big ones is the interviewer catches him off guard and basically says, like, why did you not send up jets to track the plane? And he says, well, it was a commercial airliner. It was not hostile, etc. And the first thing you go, wait, you just said it's not hostile. How would you know a rogue Boeing 777 is not hostile?
Right.
There's only one possible way, unless you guys can come up with another one. You had communications with the plane. That's the only way. You must have had communications with the plane and known that it was an emergency event, that it was not a hijacking and not a suicidal pilot. And then the answer is pretty clear.
Otherwise, they would have sent up.
Otherwise, they would have sent up the jets.
Mm-hmm. That's really weird.
And he even says, like, are we going to shoot down the plane? And she's like, no, you said that, not me. And he's like, well, why would you send up jets then? She goes, to track the plane? Like, aren't you unable to track it? Like, aren't you afraid it might fly into the Petronas Towers, two of the biggest buildings on the planet? That this is a post 9/11 world we're talking about here. And he gets so uncomfortable. And then he says this really random thing where, she asks him, well, why are you talking about shooting down the plane? And he goes, well, the Americans would. It's like, what? And then he looks over to the side, and like he's looking at his handler.
If they did go up, in hindsight, would you agree that we wouldn't be in the situation we are now, which is
I don't
7
think
weeks
so.
of
I
searching
don't think that's
and billions of
speculative.
dollars?
Even if we send it up, are you going to say that we're going to shoot it down?
Well, you said that, not me.
No, I'm asking you.
I could not
So
possibly
what's
answer
the,
that.
if
I'm
you're
not
not going to
defense.
shoot it down, what's the point of sending it up?
To see where it's going.
Well, to see it going, you need a fighter for that? We're talking about military procedures. And if I did shoot it down, you'll be the first to say, how can you shoot down a commercial airline with 14 nationals, half of them Chinese? I'll be in a worse position probably.
Why shoot it down, though, if it's not hostile?
Well, the Americans would.
When you look at the evidence, it's so obvious that there's a cover-up going on. And you realize about this fire event, which is, in my opinion, undeniable. I mean, you've got experts already speculating the fire event before the batteries were even told to exist on the plane. Mm-hmm. And now in 2024, we know the dangers of lithium-ion batteries. I mean, Billy Vincent even told me back in 2014, there were supposedly manufacturing defects that were happening much more commonly with these batteries to cause them to explode. And that they've kind of figured that out now, but none of the manufacturers will probably admit to that because there's big liability issues related to it. So then the question everybody asks is, well, why are we covering up a fire event, right? And a lot of people ask me, is it orbs or is it fire event? Is it the videos that are real? It's both. It's both that are real. So the only reason why we would cover up a fire event is because, and Catherine T's sighting, is that plane should have gone down somewhere in the Nicobar Islands if that plane's on fire for over an hour. They're battling this lithium-ion battery fire. People are probably passing out and not waking up from the smoke circulating out throughout the plane. So where's the plane, right? Like, it's 2024 now. If that plane crashed in Nicobar Islands, it's a pretty active shipping area. You're going to find a crashed plane there. In fact, where's the plane at all at this point? This is, some people try to bring up Titanic. The Titanic, this is 100 years ago. This is not, we didn't have any satellites in outer space then. We didn't have this SOSUS system back then. Planes just can't vanish anymore. So this is where the MH370s come into play. So to give a little background, these videos have been on the internet since 2014, since days or weeks, at most weeks after this plane disappeared. 2 videos, both military videos, perfect synchronization, 2 completely different angles and assets. One purporting to be from a satellite system and the other one from a Predator drone, or the exact drone model we're not sure because all the drones look basically the same, but like an MQ-1 series model. And these videos show the plane being surrounded by 3 orbs, I'm going to call them, UFOs if you want to call them that, and showed some anomalous propulsion and vectoring capability on the plane spinning around it, and then just disappearing. And these videos reemerged on the subreddit UFOs on August 7th, 2023, so a little over a year ago. And I was kind of a lurker, like somebody that just wanted, weird videos, check it out. And what struck out to me right away was the drone video. I remember seeing it from 2014. Because back in 2014, when the plane disappeared, I was kind of watching and seeing what the news stories were all about. I thought it was weird that the plane disappeared. I knew the United States government must know more about the plane because they don't just disappear. And I remember seeing that video, and I remember going, wow, I remember seeing this 10 years ago and just thinking, it's video games or something? I don't know what I'm looking at here. This is like this color thermal video. I didn't have any basis to understand what military footage even looked like at that point. But then I saw the second video. And again, this was last year.
And who put out the video? Where did it come from?
So the videos are the earliest upload of them is from this account called Regicide Anon. This is the main source of these videos. They seem to be like a UFO account. They have other videos on their old YouTube accounts been deleted, but none of them were like these videos. Like it was just other stuff that's like either clearly, obviously fake and stuff like that. But this was like
nobody's sure who the author is of the video.
Still a mystery to this day in terms of who that person was who published them.
And didn't you offer an award if somebody could prove that it was fake?
So we had this $150,000 bounty, not just to prove that it's fake. Because really the only absolute proof is that the hoaxer would come forward and say, here's the source work from my old hard drive where I put it all together, and here's the version of the video.
So they can make
$100,000
if they say, hey, here's how I did it.
They could have. We had to take it off the table just because there was like some disagreements between one of the people at Kim.com was one of the people that put up some of this money, only for him to, without anyone ever meeting the bounty, just claiming that, but this is all fake. I'm against all this now, which was really, really bizarre heel turn for him. But we did have the bounty up, and I also worried that I've had so many people try to scam me, like skeptics and debunker people that the videos break their minds. People are fabricating fake evidence. They are trying to do like social engineering scams on me and things like that. So I said, okay, we had to take the bounty out, but we had it up for several months.
Right.
Nobody ever came forward. There is no hoaxer of these videos. No one made these videos. I'm 100% sure.
I thought I just saw you. Were you talking with like a CGI VFX artist that took a look at it, or what's the deal with that?
Everybody always asks me to talk to CGI and VFX experts, and I sit there and go, I talk to engineers and physicists, because when we look at the videos, especially when you look at the drone video where you see this zap of the plane disappear, that's all you have to see to know that the video is 100% real. And the reason is because you're looking at a cold, black, endothermic event. There is no such thing as that in conventional physics right now. But when you look at this physics of about 0-point energy, and what a lot of very, very prominent physicists have said that work in black projects that are engineers, they say, no, there is something called negative energy, and we can tap into it. And that's exactly what we're seeing in those videos. And that's exactly what's needed for both warp drives and wormholes to exist. So people have asked me to talk to VFX experts. One actually came up on multi-time award-winning European visual effects expert, reviewed the videos as well, and the most prominent debunk that's out there, that people claim that there's these pictures that were supposedly used to produce the satellite video that are on the internet, but they only date to 2016 through the Internet Archives, and they don't predate that. And he basically came out and said, there's no way that these satellite pictures, these pictures could be used to create this video. We can see moving clouds. And this is what real forensic analysis is. And if you just actually do forensic analysis and you compare like the first frame to the last frame in any one sequence, you can actually see not the clouds just moving, but actually evolving. Like the top moves more than the bottom moves because of the wind shear that's blowing over the clouds. So we know 100% undeniable the clouds are moving, absolutely. They just, just like if I were to look outside, it doesn't look like the clouds are moving at a very high rate of speed. I didn't think I'd have to explain, very basic physics concepts. And the further you are away from something, the less it looks like it's moving as well.
Let's do a quick recap. MH370 takes off from Kuala Lumpur bound for Beijing. but loses communication with air traffic control after about 40 minutes from takeoff. At this point, Ashton suggests that a fire, possibly caused by lithium-ion batteries in the cargo, forces the crew to change course. This is supported by Mike McKay, an oil rig worker who reported seeing an aircraft on fire near the South China Sea. After making a sharp westward turn, Malaysian military radar tracks the plane as it's crossing the Malay Peninsula and into the Ottoman Sea. Radar contact was lost at 2:22 a.m. local time north of Penang. Witness Catherine T. reports seeing a glowing orange object near the Nicobar Islands, the same location and time as when the Inmarsat data seems to change. At this point is when the orbs appear. Ashton references two synchronized videos, one from a satellite, the other from a drone, showing three glowing orbs moving in a triangular formation around the plane. These orbs seem to appear right after the military radar is lost. These videos have yet to be debunked, as Ashton believes these orbs suggest advanced technology was involved. Other things to note: while Inmarsat data suggested that the plane flew south into the Indian Ocean, an anomalous ping at 1840 UTC raises doubts. Ashton theorizes that this ping marks the moment that the plane was teleported. Debris from MH370 was found on Reunion Island, Madagascar, and Mozambique, but Ashton argues that the drift patterns don't match the flight path indicated by the Inmarsat data. He uses this as evidence that the plane may not have crashed where the official data suggests. Instead, he believes that this supports the teleportation hypothesis.
And you're thinking that it could have, what the video shows is that it went into a wormhole?
We can literally produce wormholes. So if you really break it down to what I think the videos are showing is that when we look at these orbs, it's not UFO, it's not flying saucers. That's one of the first things I noticed looking at it, is that we've got this thermal video in super high quality of a drone at filming this at night. That's why they're using thermal as well. And you can see this heat signature of this orb that's got I've been speaking to Bob Grenier, low energy nuclear reaction engineer and expert, and he's saying like that heat signature looks like the Tesla sign. That's cold fusion. That's like we're looking at a magnetic monopole, which is like this magnetic field that stretches out in every direction instead of a normal dipole of a magnetic field. So it's not a bar magnet. It's a magnet that's shooting out in all directions and creates a spherical form. And if you look up Ken Shoulders, you find out that this guy was a very accomplished engineer, and he found out that plasma will self-organize under the right conditions, and that it will form spheres because it creates these magnetic monopoles that are out there. He called them exotic vacuum objects, and he called them that because he believed they were cohering energy directly from the vacuum, which would indicate the vacuum's not empty, that they're pulling this energy out there, and this allows them to be self-organizing and self-sustaining. And what I think we're looking at here is that he wanted to make toys out of his technology. He was a guy that was, somebody who I think did not want to make weapons. And the government came in and said, nope, we're taking this, we're classifying this. Department of Energy probably steps in because there's major energy implications to cold fusion as well. And now we've turned it into some type of super weapon that's multi-purposed. And it can be used for teleportation because you can create electromagnetic fields with these things that is so powerful that it breaks through something called the Schwinger limit. So when I say that the only thing you need to see to know the videos are real is the part where the plane gets zapped out in the thermal video where it goes all black. Because we see the secret sauce. The orbs, right before the plane disappears, they converge. Why are they converging? Why are they coming together? And the answer why they're coming together is that Coulomb's law, an electrical force charge, increases exponentially as the distance collapses between them. So I found another paper by Landis just like a week ago. And he says exactly this when it comes to producing negative energy, is that as your objects are coming together, the field around them, the electromagnetic energy increases, energy density increases, and the energy inside reduces to the point where it creates a negative energy bubble, essentially. And then how would you determine where it goes? Quantum entanglement gives us the answer to that as well. And quantum entanglement, which has been proven for a very long time, if we measure a state over here, then we have an equal or opposite reaction somewhere else at a distance, which can happen faster than the speed of light. That's non-locality. So this is where people came up with this theory of 4 orbs, where they would say, well, there's another orb somewhere else. And what's happening is these orbs are converging on the plane. This electromagnetic flux is breaking through the Schwinger limit, making space-time become nonlinear, producing this negative energy that we need, like a bubble. And then boom, it goes from over there, and now it's just over here somewhere else.
How do you control, you say it's self-organizing, but how do you control the plasma orbs? Like if you wanted to do that to the plane, who's controlling it?
So here's the interesting thing about plasma is that it blocks radio signals. So electromagnetic signals can't penetrate. However, there's something called the AndofBom Effect, which would state that if we have a solenoid that traps the electromagnetic fields inside of the solenoid, meaning there's nothing on the outside, no electromagnetic fields, and we shoot photons past it, we see a phase shift. It means it shifts a little bit. Why though? Because if there's no electromagnetic fields there shouldn't be any shift. It should just hit the wall exactly where it goes. And the reason is because space is not empty. There's potentials outside of that. So even if the electromagnetic fields are trapped, there are electromagnetic potentials outside of it. They're being manipulated. And Hal Puthoff has a patent that he just calls communication system. And I love how these engineers are so smart and they know how the disinformation works. So they leave everything that they publish like really intentionally vague. But when you look at the Aharonov-Bohm effect and the idea of a scalar wave where we have one electromagnetic wave like this, and then we have another wave exactly out of phase. It's the exact same phase, but 180 degrees out. What will happen is they cancel each other out, and now you just have a flat line. Standard physics will say there's nothing there. There's nothing there. There's nothing left. Scalar physics will say there's a scalar potential, as shown by Maxwell's original electromagnetic equations. And this scalar potential is fundamentally equivalent to gravity. You're shooting a longitudinal wave through the medium of the energy all around us that can be produced at a distance. This is what Hal Puthoff's patent is. When Hal Puthoff has his communication patent, it's not just a normal communication patent. He even references the Aharonov-Bohm effect. It's a gravitational wave communication device. Because just like with the Aharonov-Bohm effect, we can see this phase shift happen. You can measure that, and you can use that as communication. The same way if I were to use like Morse code, that I can send a communication that way. So we can remote control these orbs. And I would argue that the most logical explanation for how we're controlling them, we see these circle formations, triangle formations. First of all, with respect to that scalar potential, you don't need just, it can be two lines going counter to one another. It can also be a triangle formation, because now where the point where they all meet is also a 0 point where all the waves are canceling each other out. So the triangle works as well, which is exactly what the orbs are doing. This is why the orbs are in a perfect triangle formation, is they're creating a scalar potential where all the electromagnetic fields cancel each other out perfectly.
What does Salvador Paez have to do with all this?
Yeah, so Salvador Paez, I reached out to him. He's one of the only people that reached out to me back when I talked to some of these physicists that I reach out to. Some of them do reach out like one time, but Salvador Paez wanted to talk to me. And so a year ago, almost a full year ago now, he wanted to set up a podcast. So I set up a podcast I didn't have to talk to Salvador Paez.
And who is he again? Like, what is...
So he got relatively famous in the UFO community around 2018 because these patents that he has out there started gaining traction. People looked at these patents. They were approved by the Navy, who he works for as an engineer. Magnetically confined fusion device, plasma fusion device, for one. Think about the orbs again. Inertial mass reduction for a transmedium craft. That means zero inertia, zero mass. Thing can float, can go between the water, sky, air, whatever. High frequency gravitational wave. Now, high frequency gravitational wave would be like how you create your own path in space where you can just flow like on a conveyor belt. Like imagine creating a conveyor belt in front of you. And then one of the other ones is piezoelectric induced superconductivity. And if you add these patents together, and I couldn't believe I didn't realize this until a few weeks ago, I'm going, he made the orbs. Like these orbs of plasma show superconductive properties. They have zero inertia. They're transmedium. They're magnetically confined fusion. Like, and one of his last patents is like high frequency electromagnetic field generator. And I'm going, that's the orbs converging to create this huge amount of electromagnetic flux, which we currently think is not possible to reach. And when I first interviewed with him, it's crazy to think back because I knew nothing about electrical engineering and I knew enough about physics to be dangerous, but that was about it. And I just wrote down everything that he ever said, everything he referenced. I could tell he was referencing real physicists, scientists. And as I researched it and looked it all up, I went, wow, there's a whole branch that like people that are engineers that like he's worked on black projects as well. I know for a fact. They know all this stuff's real. They know this physics and stuff is real. And they don't care that all the science influencers like the Neil deGrasse Tysons, the Bill Nye's, the science guys, all the public facing people, even the Eric Weinsteins or whatever of the world, these guys have no idea. Unless they've worked in the black projects, they have no idea about it. And they just think that it's this fringe area of science.
Who's behind the black projects? Is that a government thing? Is that a...
Yeah. Well, so just to finish that thought, and then I'll answer that question. Great question. So the thing that bugged me about the Salvador Pi's interview is that he was praising me so much. It literally felt like he had come from a future where he had met a future version of myself or something like that. Because at the time, this was like only a few months into the investigation. I knew nothing about the science or the physics. I didn't know what to expect. And I'm like, why is this guy praising me so much? And it wasn't until a few weeks ago when I realized like he either made these orbs or he knows who did, because where did these patents come from that he didn't just conjure these ideas into his head, right?
But he never came right out and said that he...
No, but I am going to do a follow-up interview November 24th with him. Finally, he got gagged after my second interview with him, and finally he's just got permission.
Who gagged him?
Presumably his leadership in the Navy that prevented him from speaking.
When are you doing that?
November 24th. You're going to want to listen because I've said I'm going to ask him directly, like, did you make the orbs? And even if he can't say the truth, right, and he has to say something like, I can't answer that question or something, you know, like no matter what he says, it'll be telling. Mm-hmm. When I do interviews with people, some people are probably afraid to talk to me because I don't do like softball questions. Like I want to know the truth. I want to get to answers, et cetera. And so the answer too is like there's this UFO hearing that's coming up in November as well, which I'm sure it's going to disappoint me because everybody just wants to talk about aliens, and all I want to do is listen to these engineers testify, like the Hal Puthoffs, the Eric Davises of the world, these guys that I know they've seen stuff that the world would otherwise never believe. I want to hear them testify. How is it that the Pentagon can't pass a budget? And I'm going to tell you guys the answer, or pass an audit. It's like $70 to $80 billion a year goes into classified projects that nobody ever gets to know about. And this is how it works. First of all, everything's set up through defense contractors intentionally so that the government has plausible deniability and they can claim we're not hiding anything. We don't have any records about this, because they don't have it. In fact, the Mansfield Amendment of 1973, I believe it was, made it so that any anti-gravity research could not be researched by the military because it has to have a specific military purpose in order for the military to actually fund it directly. That actually needs to go away for sure, because what that meant was that all the anti-gravity research went to the private defense contractors, and now they're completely shielded from FOIA requests. So now the public has no way whatsoever to access any of it. We learned from the Manhattan Project how to prevent leaks from getting out too. And the answer is compartmentalization. So it's highly compartmentalized. The only people that know about this stuff, military people, have no idea. I remember hearing Commander Fravor from the Nimitz incident talk about, we couldn't have this technology, I would know about it. Respectfully, Commander Fravor, you have no effing clue about the type of technology that we have. None at all. If you're flying planes out there, you are not privy to this. In fact, generals and admirals are not even privy to a lot of this unless you are in like the right position in the right location at the right time.
Didn't somebody from Lockheed Martin tell him this is a classified, whatever he saw was a classified project or something like that?
Yeah, so there was these Wilson Davis memos where Eric Davis, he's like probably the most predominant engineer and physicist when it comes to like wormhole science and warp drive science that's out there in negative energy, where he basically says that Admiral Wilson was trying to get access to some of these compartmentalized programs under like Lockheed Martin or the various other defense contractors, and he wasn't on the bigot list, which means he's not on the list to get into the party, basically. But he asks, Eric Davis asked him, like, who are the types of people that were on the list? And he's like, it wasn't military people. It was like third party, like even project managers in some cases would be on the list, but not like, not the director of the DIA, of the Defense Intelligence Agency. So the defense contractors get the money. say, the government gives them money for some project, then they make shell companies, umbrella companies, just like in the movies when you're laundering money, you're hiding money. They do the exact same thing. They make a shell company for this black project. They filter the money through that. Now it's going to be this paper trail is very hard to work it back up to them. And then if anything happens, they can just cut all ties and make that all go away. And then they will hire these engineers to be, if you're an engineer that works in black projects, you're basically a freelancer. Like, you can be aligned with certain, like the Navy, like Salvador Pi is, but it's better to be an independent contractor where you can bounce around and you do these little jobs for them. And the way it works is they'll say, well, this is the science thing that we want to look into now. And then you come in and you either do the research for them, or you might build them something, and then you never know what happens to it. So even the situation where like Salvador Pi is, he might have built some of the components, and he might be seeing the components on the videos going, oh, that's my high frequency gravitational wave thing, but he maybe didn't put it all together. Right. Where somebody else puts it together, and this is how they compartmentalize it, where you just don't really know. And then, so that's why one of the things I'm going to ask him is, I'm going to have him look at the video, and what I want to ask him is, what takeaways do you, like, what sticks out to you when you watch this video? Because I want to know his thought process in terms of like, what things is he familiar with when he sees there.
Do you think the general public should know everything that's going on behind the curtain?
That's a great question, because if you ask, I think all these other UFO disclosure advocates, they say no. And this is the difference between them and me, probably, is a lot of them will openly say, even Michael Schellenberger, he was just on with Ross Coulthart and Joe Rogan, and on Ross Coulthart, he says, I'm not like Julian Assange. I'm not going to damage national security. I'm not just going to put it all out there. He even asked for permission from the DOD before he just did this whole article about Immaculate Constellation or whatever it is. And for me, if you have that approach, you can never get to the full truth. Because now I'm always wondering, what are you leaving behind? What are you not telling us? Aliens are not a national security issue, contrary to what the UFO community would tell you. Nobody's afraid that, knowing about aliens causes some national security issue. Our lives are not going to change one little bit knowing that aliens exist. In fact, you know what? Aliens exist, guys. To me, a jellyfish and a squid is an alien. So, I have no problem believing there's something out there, right? Doesn't matter. I'm still going to work tomorrow. Still got to pay the bills, whatever. The national security issue is if you see this UFO hovering, or you see the orbs in the MH370 video, the people that aren't thinking critically just go, oh, that's neat. That must be aliens. Oh, cool. Look at it zipping around, doing stuff that we can't imagine. Like, oh, we can't possibly figure that out. The people that are the critical thinkers look at that hovering UFO and they go, wait, what's the energy source for that? The amount of energy it would take to keep this thing hovering in the air with no propulsion and to be able to zip off at hypersonic speeds or to teleport away. Based on conventional physics, the energy levels are astronomical. Like, to create a wormhole, according to the conventional view of physics, some people argue it takes the mass the size of Jupiter, right? This is energy levels that are beyond comprehension. So if you just do E equals mc squared and reverse it back to figure out how much mass it would take, no matter what the fuel source is, the amount of mass that would have to be in that craft is astronomical. There's no possible fuel source based on conventional rocketry or anything like that could ever be powering that UFO. So the question then you say is, well, it must then be getting the energy from the environment. But what is the environment in this case? The answer is it's the 0 point energy all around us. That sea of energy. That's where the energy is coming from. And it tells us something very important. It says that energy level is extractable, and it's not some small amount of energy like some of these mainstream physicists want to say. It's a huge amount of energy and practically unlimited well. That's the national security issue. That's the issue where overnight it would change our society. Oil, fossil fuels, obsolete. Even solar panels and wind, obsolete. We can actually have real green energy. But what comes with new energy sources also come new weapons. And it's not just about being able to teleport an airplane or a nuke onto somebody. It's about the ability to create like a black hole super weapon is what I would call it. Like what we were worried about with CERN doing. But CERN, these particle colliders, this is all for show. These things have also been sabotaged to not find the truth. You don't need a massive particle collider. People think, I call us like cavemen and primitives, because we think rocket go up, ooh, rocket make big explosion, awesome. Or, oh, we make big particle collider that's 20 miles long, blah, blah. guys, we have lasers that are more powerful than particle colliders are. Like literally lasers amplification of emission of energy. And
so do you think the whole alien narrative, is that just a false narrative to redirect from this classified technology? Is that what
that's another great question. You guys are asking really good questions today. That's one where if you asked me like a year ago, I would have said, no, it must be alien technology, blah, blah, blah. The more I learn about the science and the more I find all this science and scientists and engineers out there talking about this since the 80s, the more sure I am about, or less sure I am about where this all comes from. Like, to me now, everything's on the table. It could be a situation where aliens are a big psyop, and I would argue they are a psyop even if they exist, because we're dangling the keys saying, look over here at aliens, all these disclosure advocates, all these UFO hearings that we're doing in Congress. Where are the biologics? Where are the alien bodies? How does that change our world?
Or that we're in a simulation. Have you ever thought about that?
Oh, 100%. I think that the holographic principle is 100% true. In order for us to actually teleport an object like that, I think the holographic principle has to be true, which presents the idea that all points in space and time are connected. This is actually what Ben Rich's response was when Ben Rich, director of Lockheed Martin Skunk Works for 16 years, he says, we had the power to take ET home. Anything that you could imagine, we've already figured it out, but it's stuck in black projects that will take an act of God to get access to. Well, I'm not God, but I'm exposing that technology to the world. And somebody asked him, like, when you said all that, what did you mean by that? And he goes, well, let me ask you this. How does ESP work? And the guy goes, well, that's a weird question. He goes, well, all points in space and time are connected. And Ben Rich says, exactly. And this is the part where you realize that there's a direct connection from this science to holography. Holography is how you make a hologram. Now, when you make a hologram, what they do is they take a two-dimensional plate and it produces a three-dimensional image off of it. Now, the cool thing about holography is every point on the plate has all of the information about the image, which seems counterintuitive because what that means is you can cut the plate in half and you can still produce the whole image. So what does that mean in terms of the information about the image itself? It's on all points on the plate. So if you look at it from our universe perspective and you imagine we are a holographic projection, then what we see as distance is just an illusion. I'm over there and I'm over here at the same time. Right? It's just where I'm being projected at any given moment. So do I think that aliens are a distraction? Absolutely. Can aliens still exist? Yes, they can still exist, of course.
You sound like you're kind of on board with like the Stephen Greer point of view.
It's funny because Stephen Greer is, in my opinion, by far the most credible when it comes to a lot of this. A lot of the engineers that I've watched videos for, some of which who are passed away sadly now, that are never going to get credit for the amazing work they did, a lot of those interviews are with Stephen Greer. And so when he talks about these whistleblowers, he found the right guys. Like, no doubt, he's got interviews with Hal Puthoff, Paul Siz, some of these people from Lockheed and stuff like that, where they're all talking about this stuff. Those are the people we should be talking to. Those are the people that should be in the congressional hearings.
Well, the one thing I wanted to say about Stephen Greer is I came across him like years ago, and he was talking about how there would be like a staged invasion. Oh, yeah. And now I'm seeing these whistleblowers come out, and they're even saying, you know, it's looking like they're scoping it out, almost like. And now I'm like, he said this years ago, and all of a sudden, this invasion narrative is it's slowly being kind of leaked out to us. So
because if you see some floaty orbs out there, most people look at it and go, "Oh, must be aliens." In fact, I think even some of these whistleblowers that are the controlled whistleblowers, a lot of them work in like the NRO or NGA, so they're working with our satellite capabilities. And they're looking and they're seeing stuff like these orbs. And in their minds, without knowing the science, they're going to go, that's got to be aliens. But if you ask them, have you actually seen any aliens on the videos? Like real, like an alien, like a little green man? No, they always say no. Mm-hmm. So how would you be able to tell if it was a defense contractor floating something around out there?
Right.
Or if it's actually something exotic? Ross Coulthard just did another interview with her name is Sarah Gunn. And she actually got asked this directly. Like, she was sure it must be aliens that she was seeing. She was in the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. But then he asked her, did you see any aliens? And she goes, no. And you're like, well, how is that compatible? And this is the difference where you need to understand the science to realize that Dr. Greer is right, that 80 to 90% of what we're seeing out there is human technology that we've figured out. Does it come from Roswell crash or something that we dug up, depending on you believe in ancient civilizations?
So it might have still came maybe from aliens, but
Could be. But then you can also ask the question, like, where did the E equals MC squared and the atomic bomb come from? Like, we figured that out. So why could we not figure out 0 point energy? So to me, all options are on the table. And with Stephen Greer, his documentary on the lost century, probably one of the best documentaries I've ever seen in my whole life. Because when it comes to 0 point energy, free energy, 100% real. People don't realize that it's kind of like how we had to change, or how the government changed UFOs to UAPs. It's a branding problem. With free energy, people think that, oh, it's like you're going to give me free energy. You're going to give it to me for free. But what it means is that we have this inexhaustible supply of 0 point energy, this sea of ocean of energy all around us. And you can imagine it's similar to wind power or solar power, but you don't need the sun to shine. You don't need the wind to be blowing. That's what it should be compared to. That's why I sometimes call it just over unity, because it's a situation where we have unlimited input. So of course we can get practically unlimited output. It's just a matter of design of your machine. But building the machine still costs money, just the same way where solar panels cost money to produce. And Dr. Greer says we've had this figured out for 80, 90 years, and they're just hiding it from us. The part where Dr. Greer went off the rails, in my opinion, was the CE5 stuff. Which, like, you've got to build up to summoning interdimensional aliens, right? You start talking about summoning interdimensional aliens, it distracts from all the great work you did on exposing the defense contractors and the engineers and all this stuff out there. And he's a smart guy. What I did is I took it a step further and said, I can understand the science. I'm going to learn it. So for the last 10 months since that Salvador Pi's interview, practically every single day I read at least 1 or 2 scientific papers from engineers and scientists that I think are credible on it. And I've done as much work as possible to teach myself quantum mechanics, electrical engineering, all these concepts I didn't understand. And then once you do that, you realize, oh, of course it's all real. It's all inevitable, because you find all the science that's been out there. And you're like, how could this science, this whole branch of physics that we've been ignoring, be written about by people like Winterberg, who he's a 95-year-old plasma and fusion science expert that's helped develop fusion bombs, and he studied under Heisenberg himself, and he came over to America from Project Paperclip, which was when we took all the Nazi scientists and German scientists, and he's talking about, you know, the Planck ether hypothesis and this sea of energy that's out there. And, you know, there's many cases like this, which is funny because people claim, like, everybody wants to put their name on it now too, right? They want to say, like, I name the God particle after me or what have you. But the truth of the story is it's been figured out for a long time, and many different people have independently figured it out. And their concept of how it works is all based on the same historical scientists and going back to Tesla, Maxwell, Dirac, all these legends that were out there from 100 years ago. Is string theory like a distraction? Great question. I think it probably is. Like, to me, all I need are 5 dimensions. I need the 3 spatial dimensions, up, down, left, right, forward, and back, time dimension, and then the last dimension is the ether, the sea of energy that's at the Planck scale that we don't perceive, but we know it's there. We're like sitting in a bathtub where our body temperature is the same temperature as the bathtub, so you can't tell that you're sitting in it. But we are in this equilibrium, and it's a thermodynamic equilibrium that's being met. But what that means is when we get to 0, that's what 0 is, the equilibrium point. But we can go below 0 into this negative energy, which is just normal energy. It's just trapped at the Planck scale. And what's happening is Hal Puthoff wrote this paper saying that why is it that a hydrogen atom, when it's at rest, doesn't radiate energy? This is a very unusual thing, because from the quantum scale, we know everything's still jittering and spinning at the quantum scale. So there should be energy being radiated out from that. In fact, if that's happening, the electron that's orbiting around the atom, around the nucleus, should lose energy and crash into the nucleus, but it doesn't. And the hydrogen atom doesn't radiate energy because they're in an equilibrium. They're like basically on top of the ocean, just bobbing on top of the ocean, where they're pulling energy out and they're losing energy at the same rate. So they're losing energy and they're gaining energy at the same rate, creates this balance, equilibrium balance going on. And this is what opens the door to infinite energy, because the Casimir effect shows if we put 2 plates close together, there's a negative energy pressure difference between them where they come together, because you're squeezing out certain wavelengths, so that 0 point energy can't fit between the plates, and that causes pressure. And this has been argued to be an induced effect that shows negative energy. Now, physicists incorrectly claim this you can't pull energy out of this, but we can. If I had two plates together, it does work like this. This can be converted into charge or battery. Robert Forward showed this in 1984. When you point this out to them, then they say, well, yes, but to separate the plates, you'd have to pull them apart, which would require the same amount of energy as it takes that you gain out of it. That might be true, but that's just an engineering problem. So Garrett Model and Bernard Hayes solved that engineering problem because they looked and said, okay, let's get to the root cause of what's going on here, is that you have this squeezing out of the 0-point energy. So that's what we want to recreate. And what they did was they created something called a Casimir cavity. There's an active patent. It expires in 2026. I'm on the record saying I plan to steal that patent after it expires in 2026.
And what's the patent?
Casimir cavities by Garrett Model and Bernard Hayes. Bernard Hayes is also a Lockheed Martin engineer, worked on black projects with them. Garrett Model is professor emeritus at University of Colorado. And they're both very into 0-point energy. So what they're doing is it's almost like, I call it the trampoline analogy, where you jump on the trampoline and you shoot up higher than where you started. Okay. And then what happens with the trampoline when you go in the air? The trampoline goes down and then it comes back up automatically. And then so you're ready to bounce again. This is kind of what the Casimir cavities are doing. What the Casimir cavities are doing is they are squeezing a little bit of energy out of the electron that's orbiting around the nucleus. Squeeze out a little bit of that radius. So kind of like a piezoelectric effect with respect to quartz. Like if you have a watch, you squeeze quartz and energy comes out. So imagine doing that, but now, then what they do is they say, okay, we pulled a little bit of energy out, and now that electron and that nucleus goes over to this other area called the cavity, which is just an open area. When it goes into the cavity, it regains the energy naturally because the energy is constantly in this equilibrium state, and it goes back to equilibrium. So it's like if I pulled water out of the ocean, is there going to be a hole left behind? No, the water collapses and fills in the hole immediately. Would I ever be able to empty the ocean with a cup? No, of course not, because it's a cycle. It's a cyclical nature where the water is eventually getting back into the ocean. This is the same idea here. So what they've done is done something very smart. We can pull a little bit of energy out. Now the electron goes into this, or the atom or the nucleus goes to this open area, and it regains the energy back naturally. And you just repeat this process. And the smaller you get this, the more powerful the effect is, because the energy is at the Planck scale, 10 to the minus 33. And the Casimir effect gets more and more powerful the closer the forces get to one another. So the smaller you make it, the more force you're getting, and then you scale it up. So the answer is, if you're trying to produce free energy, you can make a magnetic motor and you can use the magnets to interact with the ether and churn up the ether, so to speak. But if you're really smart in 2024, what you want is a microchip. You want a tiny microchip with billions of transistors that are smaller than the size of my nail. And this is what we're doing with chips that are going into AI these days as well.
Yep.
And you create that, and now you've got something that can produce free energy from the 0-point energy that can power your computer, can power my phone. We can put a microchip like that into anything. That's the real future. And to bring this back around to MH370, so now we've got 20 Freescale semiconductor engineers on board this plane. 8 of them are Chinese nationals. They work for the American company, Freescale Semiconductors. They're going to China, and their reason is to upgrade the plants. The company said these were all very important people and engineers related to the company. They had just come out with a microchip that was smaller than my nail. Like, what did I say? 3 micrometers or 3 millimeters on each side. It seems inevitable to me that they had some type of technology that was using these principles that was going to give China a leg up, to help them catch up to where we're at with this technology.
Okay.
If you have this technology, and even a lot of these UFO disclosure people are saying it now, it's a situation where it's like, you're in the sandbox, only one person can have this toy. Because if 2 people have this toy, now you're fighting. And it's not going to end well for anybody. I would argue that the people hiding this technology are doing it because they see the destructive capability and the inevitability of total annihilation. And they say maybe they're just kicking the can down the road, delay it as long as possible for humanity to figure it out. Or it's just you can't let your adversaries get close to this. And if they try to, everything's on the table to prevent them. I mean, if you look at it from the perspective of the outcome would be total annihilation of the planet, you can justify anything, any evil acts.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I think was going on here. And I think the United States is far ahead of Russia and China, but that China's probably catching up faster than Russia is. And at some point, specifically with AI, all of this physics is going to come rushing out. And people are going to start wondering, why is the AI telling me how to produce anti-gravity when mainstream physics tells me that it's not possible or what have you, right? It's going to get really, really awkward.
Yeah.
And that's going to happen sooner than people realize. And so this is part of the reason why I think that I've been allowed to do these podcasts. Mainstream media won't talk to me, and I'm sure it's because the government's told them, don't talk to this guy. And a lot of these disclosure UFO people won't mention my name. They won't talk to me either because they're being controlled by the government to spread this very specific narrative of, yes, you can talk about aliens, but no, you can't touch this, free energy, 0 point energy, the anti-gravity capabilities. Don't touch any of that.
And they're the ones all over the legacy media.
Oh, and exactly.
Yeah.
And you'll see, like, even with Lou Elizondo, right?
Yeah.
It's clear that it's not organic. He's got literally his whole schedule is scheduled going, okay, 60 Minutes today, tomorrow I'm on with News Nation, then I'm going on Joe Rogan, now I'm on The Daily Show. I mean, this is not organic. As somebody who's been on a lot of podcasts, I can tell you that is not organic. You have to have like a PR person doing that stuff for you to get that all set up, and it was all planned out ahead of time.
I think it's like you said too, like Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, if it was something the government didn't want getting out, that would be the
you nailed it.
The scenario. So
there seems to be such a concern as of late, obviously, with AI coming into play, that will bring about the end of the world. Do you see it being that?
Man, it might be our savior. I always think about this Peter Thiel interview he did on Joe Rogan, where Peter Thiel's connected to the CIA through Palantir. And I'm convinced he knows about this technology. A lot of these people do. If you're a billionaire and you're connected to some of these government agencies, that's the real deep state. It's not just this swampy government or whatever. You've got the people that are in charge of the CIA and the Director of National Intelligence. They know some of these CXOs of various large energy and defense contractors. And then the people that are doing the surveillance as well. Like Elon Musk is probably also in the know because he's shooting spy satellites in outer space for the Department of Defense. And Peter Thiel says, randomly in this Joe Rogan interview, starts talking about warp drives. And every time people bring that up, everybody pings me on it because they're like, Ashton, they're like stealing your narratives that you were pushing. You're like, I'm the only one a year ago talking about warp drives and wormholes being real and being possible. And now Peter Thiel's saying, well, what if this alien race, they would need warp drives to get to us. But what if this technology is so powerful that you would have to have complete totalitarian control over your populace? Otherwise, it's assured destruction. Because if any two people are fighting and they both have access to a doomsday weapon, and all they have to do is press a button, we're not going to last. We're not going to last at all. I even just recently was thinking about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan against ISIS. You can clearly justify that, like, religious fundamentalism to the point where, like, you're not afraid of death and that you're even probably trying to bring about the end times. Like, that can't be allowed to exist on a planet where we have 0 point energy and unlimited free energy, because the people that are out there willing to blow themselves up and commit jihad are certainly going to be willing to blow up the whole planet and wipe us all out.
Yep.
And so you think about that, you go, whoa, this gets really dark, because this is where Peter Thiel goes, maybe we have to be either all angels or all demons. And I keep thinking we're never going to be all angels. So then the other answer is totalitarian fascist control over everything that everybody thinks and believes, and there's no original thought is allowed because everybody has to be perfectly aligned. It's a little scary too when you start thinking about some of these conspiracies about the WEF and this one world government stuff as well that people talk about, which I was never really into. But when you look at it through this lens of like 0 point energy and unlimited power, you go, maybe these people see the writing on the wall and they're like, this is the only way we survive. And, whether you agree or disagree, but
it is an interesting way to look at it, because you always hear the other side of it. But if there is a technology out there like that, then like you say, maybe you need totalitarianism. Not that I'm for that at all, but I'm just saying.
Yeah, but you could never have total.
Well, how do you think it's going to play out then? I mean, how do you see it playing out how does it end? Do we get
Only if it's a happy ending.
Do we ever get
want to hear it.
Do we get disclosure on this stuff or
I think we wipe ourselves out. I think that's the way that it happens. I mean, to me, and this is why I'm conflicted over talking about it like every day, you know.
Right.
And I've had a lot of conversations with Jesse Michaels, who I like a lot, and I know he's very concerned about that. And part of the reason why he hasn't had me on his podcast is like, I don't want to be responsible if this is all true, that we end up destroying ourselves. But the other view, to steelman the other argument, is, well, you know, anything that humans can do, we should be privy to that knowledge, and whatever happens is our fate. And we haven't destroyed ourselves with nuclear bombs yet, and atomic bombs. So, you know, maybe we can make it through this thing as well. I do think that our civilization will have to change in a major way. And I look at myself more on the side of Assange and Snowden than on the side of the people that are controlled. For me, I've exposed our surveillance capabilities, how our Sibir satellite system works, our constellations of satellites that are scanning the whole world and beaming it to ground-based computers. I've exposed the technology, laid it bare. I could have easily filtered my own stuff and said that I think it's cloaking that's going on in these videos, which would have been easier for people to accept. But no, I keep it 100, and you know, we can teleport stuff. Our reality is a lot more magical than what people think. And the people right now, some people would argue that the people in charge right now that have this technology are already evil, so it can't be any worse than it is. I don't really subscribe to this idea that everything's black and white. I think it's really more shades of gray. The people that are hiding it, they have their own reasons for doing so. And the people that want it out, I think that what's happening is some of them are older and they're looking at their children and their grandchildren, and they're looking at the framework of our society right now, and they're going, something needs to change. You know, we're at a point too where this technology has reached a level of maturity where it's so far beyond the paradigm, it just looks like Harry Potter magic to people when we see it. And to drop this on people or to keep hiding this from people, like, it's going to make things worse and worse. Because even when we finally do reveal this, people are going to have psychological breaks, like legitimate psychological breaks.
Right.
They're going to go, how could this have been kept hidden? You know, does this mean that my government's lying to me about everything? Spoiler, maybe. And, you know, and for a lot of people, that's just something that goes completely against their entire worldview. But if you keep lying and lying and longer, that just gets worse and worse. It's like if you're cheating on your spouse and you just keep lying about it, you know, the more lies that to add up, the worse it's going to be in the end. The best thing you can do is just say it right off the bat. Don't lie about it. Tell the truth about it. We've potentially been lying about it for 80 years. Now we're at the point where...
So it's like Roswell?
Yeah, we've messed with people. Probably, or the Philadelphia experiment, things like that. When you date it back, it does look like it goes back to like the Manhattan Project, for the most part. That was something that Tucker Carlson first floated on Joe Rogan as well, which is the idea of like, maybe we've been hiding something else since the Manhattan Project. And I think that's when, because a lot of these scientists talk about this energy that's out there and how much energy it is, including Richard Feynman. He was on the Manhattan Project. He said that the amount of energy in just a small area, like the size that I've got holding right here, is enough energy to boil all the Earth's oceans. When you think about that, you go, okay, he's saying there's a huge amount of energy right there that we're not tapping into. So you imagine they showed E = MC squared. They showed the atomic bomb. We dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They didn't show the other side, that we figured out we don't even need this small amount of mass, like, you know, like this coaster here. We would use this coaster and turn the mass of this coaster into energy and creates this huge amount of energy. They realized we don't even need that. The energy is actually all around us everywhere. And we can produce, you know, a black hole or an explosion without any of that. And they decided we were never going to tell anybody about it. You know, we're going to weaponize it. We're going to use it to our advantage. And so then you go back to, well, MH370, what was the point of all that? Well, it's a message to our adversaries saying we've got technology that can blip your plane out of existence or to somewhere else, anywhere we want on the planet. We can warp a nuke onto you. Next time your plane takes off, you know, if you're Vladimir Putin, next time your plane takes off might be the last plane flight you ever take. And bonus, we can just tell the world that, the plane just disappeared, and everybody will just believe us when we say it. And if your intelligence agencies try to say the United States did something, we'll just say, well, that just has all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, and we'll have 50 intelligence operatives sign a letter that says that it has all the hallmarks of disinformation apparatus. And, I'm being coy and connecting this to political stuff like the Hunter Biden laptop, but that's how the disinformation actually works. That's how we operate. That's how we were able to make people just believe that a plane can disappear in 2014. So if you're Putin, if you're Z, or any of these other political leaders, or Kim Jong-un or whatever, like, you're terrified if you realize we have this technology and you want to advance it, but you don't want to mess around with trying to steal it from us, because we'll disappear you.
Well, you'd think that they're working on their own, though, just like everything else, wouldn't you think?
What do you mean in terms of who's
as far as coming up with their own technology to do
the
same thing?
100%. And if it is from reverse engineered UFOs or whatever that might be, then they probably have their own. Then they've been trying to work on it as well. And then it's just a matter of who's advancing the technology quicker. Because here's the crazy part. Even though we've got these orbs circling this plane in these videos and teleporting a plane, that seems just space age magic tech to us. That might just be the beginning, honestly. Like, we're talking like we might be able to build a Stargate, like Stargate SG-1, and like that type of thing might actually be possible. We have a permanent Stargate between the two locations. Or maybe right now you need to have a fourth orb that determines where the plane goes. But maybe in the future you figure out, well, there's already existing entangled particles and I can just tap into that. And now I don't even need to have a fourth orb somewhere, which might limit it. We can maybe only teleport to somewhere else on Earth or to the moon where you have to send the fourth orb there. But if we can use existing entanglement, then potentially we can go to Andromeda Galaxy now. So, and then with weaponization too, like, yes, maybe you can teleport an object, but if you scale this up, in my mind, it's self-evident that you'd be able to create a black hole out of this exact same science and technology, one that within minute, second, etc., would just eat up the entire planet, and that would be it.
So one last thing, and you kind of touched on a little bit as far as the teleporting and the black wormhole with the plane. Where did it end up? I mean, what do you think about that?
The plane is being teleported in the Nicobar Islands near where Catherine T sees it, within 100 miles. We know because we have coordinates in the satellite video in the bottom left. It says NROL 22, and then there's coordinates that shift when the perspective of the image shifts, which means somebody's logged into a computer system that's our spy satellite computer system, and they're doing a screen recording of it. They definitely got caught. And if you look at the radar tracks as well that coincide with Catherine T's location, those radar tracks, if you extrapolate them out, go right past the coordinates in that video as well, which to me, that's already proof. I mean, if this is a murder trial and you've got coordinates of somebody's car right at the murder scene, that's going to convince the jury for sure. Now, the plane appears to be going to the west because we use that same right-hand rule in electrical engineering, and that right-hand rule, when we map the movement of the orbs around the plane, indicate the plane's going backwards. In fact, it looks like the plane's getting sucked backwards in the video as well a little bit. And we can tell the plane's going to the east because we map those coordinates, and we can see that the plane's going to the perspective of the video is going to the east. So that means the plane will be going somewhere to the west. Well, it turns out there was a fire suppression bottle that washes up in the Maldives, a Boeing 777 fire suppression bottle, around March 25th, 2 to 3 weeks after the plane disappears. Washes up in the Maldives, had to be empty, otherwise it wouldn't have floated. Gets completely ignored, even though there's a serial number visible right on it, at least a partial serial number. 20 islanders on a small island see the plane in the early morning hours. Mark Dugain interviewed them. Sergio Calduvo interviewed them. Highly credible. You can watch the videos of them. They clearly saw an airplane in the sky. These people don't see jumbo jets flying around the sky. And they saw the plane flying south in the Maldives towards Diego Garcia military base. Diego Garcia military base is one of the sketchiest military bases on the entire planet. And just recently, the UK came to an agreement to give the land, other than the military base, back to the original people that lived there, that we displaced from that location. But not the military base. We're keeping that. There must be something underground in that base. There's a bunch of contracts that I dug up that show dredging and advanced construction projects. There's nothing really on the surface that would indicate anything's changed over the last 20 or 30 years. And this was also, there was a Philip Wood picture, the adult American passenger, posted on the 4chan website that claimed to be that he was captured by military and that he was being held prisoner and he didn't know where. people looked at the EXIF data on it and it has coordinates of Diego Garcia military base. People also then found out that this Diego Garcia military base was a CIA black ops site that they would transfer prisoners from Afghanistan through it as well back in the day. So if you add all this stuff up, I mean, I don't have absolute proof that the plane ended up Diego Garcia, but to me, if I'm betting, that's the best location. Plus, like I said before, plane can't land in a commercial airport anywhere on the planet, otherwise it's going to be found. So some military base in the middle of the Indian Ocean, nothing for thousands of miles around it.
It's incredible.
That's a lot
So
to wrap
it's
your
wild.
head around, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and there's even more too. Like, just to give you another little tidbit. Because a lot of people ask me, like, why are you sure this is America or U.S. that did this? And well, we're filming it on 2 videos. We can see a General Atomics Predator drone that is filming the plane, and the NROL-22, which is a United States surveillance launch. But China hacked the Malaysian government on March 9th, the very next day. And they stole crisis meeting minute notes about the plane and classified information about the plane. This is all public information that you can find out. Why would China be hacking the Malaysian government with a sophisticated social engineering hack saying, like, we found the parts of the plane, so somebody clicked on it and then they got a virus and they had full access to the database? What would be classified about the plane the next day? Well, the communications, presumably, if they hid those communications from the public. And also China then leaked some satellite imagery on March 13th, 5 days after the plane disappeared, onto the internet. It got reported on as a debris field. But when you look at it, first of all, there was no debris field. They searched the South Indian Ocean. Second of all, you look at the images. And for the people watching, I urge you to Google China satellite images MH370. It looks like 3 orbs around another object. And you can even see the same low altitude cumulus clouds that we see in the video, in the satellite video.
Why would you have the need for the fire? Why wouldn't they just make it go into the wormhole and you just totally, why do you have to have this fire
And
scenario?
that's probably one of the areas where the biggest gaps, where we can't know exactly what they were thinking in terms of why the large operation. If you believe a very unusual letter to Ashton Forbes that got posted on YouTube, then it was all a big show. It was a big production, start to finish, and that they did it for dramatic effect. To me, the answer is to move the plane away from the South China Sea, where all of China's surveillance apparatus is at, especially if it's a message to China. You want this plane to go as far away from the South China Sea as possible, and then you teleport the plane out there, because you want China to know that you did it, but you don't want them to see exactly how technology works. You don't want them to see the videos, because if they see those videos, just like I reverse engineered the physics in the videos and it only took me less than a year, China and Russia's intelligence is definitely going to be able to reverse engineer that, right? And that's exactly what we didn't want to have happen. So they wanted the China satellite picture. You look at the China satellite picture, it's much further away. It's much lower quality and detail. You would never have been able to reverse engineer how the orbs work based on their imagery. But with those videos, you can figure it all out. And that's why Lieutenant Commander Edward C. Lin, the guy that I've identified as the person who leaked those videos, probably why they came after him so hard. They tried to get this guy in prison for life for espionage, only to later admit they had no actual evidence he committed any espionage whatsoever, and that he wasn't helping anybody else out. I think he just wanted the truth for the American people, to know that we've got this technology, or that this technology exists, and maybe he thought it was aliens because maybe he wasn't privy to the fact that we've got these black projects, and then the military comes and arrests you and they go, no, you just gave away our super secrets. And this connects to the UFO community as well, where again, they're fine with you talking about aliens, and maybe he thought he'd be fine if it was aliens, but if it turns out it's our technology that we figured out, now it's national security. Now you've got to throw the guy in prison. Even after they admitted there was no espionage, they put the guy in prison for 9 years. He got 3 years shaved off, so he got out after 6, but 9 years for dissemination of classified information? That is way, way too much time compared to what other people got, where they just get slaps on the wrist for the same offenses.
Was it his YouTube channel, the one that, or did
I think
they
the way it
find
played
those
out
videos?
is he was presumably a spy for us as well, for us, because he had a pre-existing relationship with the NCIS and the FBI. And he had a bunch of Taiwanese contacts because he was from naturalized American from Taiwan. So he came over from Taiwan as a child and became an American. And we trusted him with like nuclear weapons and all this stuff. But he liked to talk though. And and this is kind of comes out in his court cases, that he was talking to people about stuff that he probably shouldn't be talking about. And presumably what happened is that he recorded the videos. He would have access to both. He was on part of this super secret spy plane program. And then he leaked them to probably one of his Taiwanese counterparts. They saw it. They put it on the internet. And now you can see how it would get back to Edward Lin, and also how he would be confused about why they're coming down on him. Maybe he didn't even know that they got leaked on the internet. And he's going, oh, crap, I shouldn't have showed Billy or whoever, right, those videos, because they saw it and they freaked out. But like anybody who looks at those videos, if those videos are real and you're on a spy plane and you're seeing that, you're going, oh crap, they're never going to figure out what happened to this plane unless they see those videos. There's just no way, you know? So to me, the story is pretty comprehensive. And for people that want to claim, oh, this is fake or whatever, like, you tell me a better story that's more comprehensive, that fits with the evidence better than this story, and I'll be happy to listen to it. I haven't heard one yet.
And on that, I think we should call it a day.
Yeah, thank you.
I know we'd love to have you come back again.
Yeah.
That was great.
And talk about...
It seems like it's going to be ever developing, so we can always come back.
Yeah, it's never going away, this story, and my goal is to get it out into the zeitgeist to the point where people can't ignore it anymore, and I'm so proud when I see people bringing it up or bringing up 0 point energy, especially when people talk about solar panels. Like, no, 0 point energy is the answer, because that's what I want. I wanted to get it into the conversation, because the science will get proven to be true, which will validate the videos in the future. Maybe that'll take a year, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, but that's okay. I've still got some more time left on this planet.
Well, yeah, I mean, appreciate you coming here.
Yep.
It's incredible to listen to.
Yeah,
any closing?
we look forward to having you back, because I know
Sounds great.
We're just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, I'll
with
be listening to that Salvador Pi's interview too. That's going to be good. So
that's about it. Don't forget to subscribe. How easy is it to subscribe?
You just want to, right underneath the video, there's a button that says subscribe. Otherwise, on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, too, on the video, you can click that, and that'll also subscribe you.
With that, we welcome all of you back in about 2 weeks for our next episode. Until then, have a good day.
Have a good life.